Plainfield Select Board meeting on June 23rd. We have 3 members of the board with us, and we are going to be starting early here at 5:30 because we're going into executive session.
Yeah, so the select board should be discussing this case privately, and we need to receive attorney-client privileged information because it involves parties letting people know the town's thinking strategy before it's implemented. And that would be a problem for us if folks, as we talked about strategic things. So I'd like to make a motion to find that premature general public knowledge of the town's plan would clearly place the select board at a substantial disadvantage in the litigation.
Second.
And all those in favor say aye.
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 And did you have a?
I have a second motion, Chair.
Okay.
I would like to motion to enter executive session under Title I, Section 313A1 for 2 reasons. 1, to discuss the pending litigation, and 2, to receive advice.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
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 Vote 3-0-0 votes.
Right, so we're gonna.
3-0-0 votes.
we're
We're going
gonna
into
meet-
executive session. We will come back at 6.
We're gonna meet.
5.
Oh, haha. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, it's very
So we're
confusing.
gonna admit
So we can
everybody.
let Brian in and,
Now there's a bunch of folks joining.
yeah.
We're still audio live, video live. Recording in progress.
I'm sneezing. Well, they come upstairs.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Sorry to make you wait in that nice, cool room.
Apologize for the convenience. Welcome, Karen.
Oh, hi, Karen.
Good to see you all.
Hey, Bram, what's that?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, Dan is here. I think he just used the restroom.
I'll email you back. I'm sorry.
I've been out of pocket all day, no worries.
So we need a motion to come out of the executive?
No, this is what we were just talking about.
Oh, okay,
We're good.
okay.
Do you want me to do this?
Yeah, do that.
All right, coming out of executive session, no action was taken in an executive session. The conversation was about 79 Bean Road in executive session. A short, probably vague update. The contempt case was completed. The defendant did not show up for the last hearing. The judge ordered that we are able to remove the trailer, the dog, the cat, anything else that may be there. And that the town can recoup fees. The town is reviewing the decision and planning our next steps based on our legal rights. And so at this time, just want to make a motion to follow the plan in place to follow the judge's order for 79 Bean Road, including having Carl Bissix work with town officials to investigate our options.
Mm-hmm.
Second.
And all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, so the first item on our agenda is any changes to the agenda that we can think of,
Everyone
or?
has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Request from Dan Caddy if we could move his segment up. He has an engagement. I don't know if he's on right now, but he would like to give his presentation.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yep,
I'm on.
Okay, Dan's on. Okay, that's good to know. We can do that.
Where would you like to move him?
How about,
First report after before Bram's report, or?
well, we can, okay, is that all right?
That's up.
Okay, let's do, yeah, right there, right before.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any announcements to make? Michael? Just,
There's the mic right there.
oh, yeah. Yeah, we want to turn that up probably.
Michael Nick from Emergency Management. The announcement is that we have put on the town website and on a couple of social media outlets. But everyone may not have heard, we have a flu center at this building at Town Hall Plainfield. And it's open from 1 to 6 in the afternoon. So if you feel overwhelmed at home, if you have any sense of that you can't get cool in your own house and you need a place to come, we have a Wi-Fi connection, we have tables, we have chairs, water, bathrooms. Come and make yourself comfortable and until you feel a little bit better.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Michael.
Any
Michael,
other,
those hours are what
1 to
are the
6.
hours? 1 to 6?
any other comments from the, okay,
Announcements, right?
That was announcements.
that was announcements. We have public comment. Kim?
Kim Nolan, 134 Beacon Road. Just wanted to let you know, there has been a lot of movement at the 79 Beacon Road residence. One car was removed yesterday. They have fixed one other car, got all the wheels on it. And then Devin moved his brown car around to the other side of the road. That one is drivable, of course, it's got a hole in the windshield. They have dug out the hitch for the camper and moved everything around it. I'm hoping within the next week or two, all that stuff's gonna be pulled out of there. I have not seen the dog. The dog house is gone.
Okay.
I mean, the dog is gone.
That's good.
Cat's still there.
Ah.
But just there has been a lot of movement. They work both days. And they brought a flatbed and they take out the car. I thought it was gonna be the camp. So there is movement.
Thank you. That's good to know.
Thank you for the update.
Any other public comment? Okay, Dan, you want to give us a report?
Yeah, hey, thank you for moving me to the beginning.
Yeah.
Sorry, my annual training of 2 weeks turned into 3 weeks and been away, but starting to follow up on some stuff. This Kim gave a great update on the 79 Bean Road, finally progress, and myself and Peter will be keeping an eye on that. And again, we encourage any communication from the residents there that can keep us informed. Several other small things, just neighbor disputes. Again, my authority is limited in the town. It's basically just facilitating a conversation and trying to apply a common effect and some common sense and facilitate communication so folks can work stuff out. I highly encourage you, if there's a dispute that you don't feel comfortable approaching the other party with, reach out to me and I'll touch base with everybody involved, get the information and kind of give a, hey, here's a way forward. Here's a suggestion. Here's a way that it can be resolved between folks. And if hopefully that works out, 90% of things can be chalked up to ineffective communication, which I try to streamline. If not, then there's other avenues, but at that point, it's kind of out of my hand. We did have, based on reports from people in the community, some issues with speeding on Country Club Road, which I was able to get in contact with the sheriff's department and adjust their patrol schedule to kind of do some targeted enforcement, which to me makes more sense than just being out patrolling. We'd rather send resources that we're paying for to where there's a issue that's been identified. So I'd encourage people, if there's issues with speeding, littering, other things where we have a contracted patrol or enforcement capability, that you reach out to me and I can kind of be that intermediary between the town and the sheriff's department, try and focus our resources. Other than that, pending questions from the select board. That is all that's fit to print, other than it's very hot.
Yeah, well, good to see you back and thank you for that. Do you have any questions from?
No questions.
And frozen.
I think you've hit them all.
Good, thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
All right, thank you. Stay cool.
Yeah, you too. Okay, so town clerk's report, please.
Brent Tobin, Town Clerk, just want to say, the reappraisal is moving forward. Obviously, we have not had an appraisal since 2008. The property values are much higher. People are very upset, but I think the listers and town office staff have answered questions, and we are scheduled to have grievance hearings. As you know, the process is, and I sent a memo today, If somebody doesn't like the result of the grievance process, there's a Board of Civil Authority meeting. And which is the Board of Civil Authority in this case, it's the Select Board, the Town Clerk, and the Justices of the Peace. We will have to adopt rules of process, and I sent around a draft of that.
Mhm.
Then we have a meeting within 15 days after the lister's grievance ends. Within that 15-day period, we start a meeting and then adjourn, go out, look at properties. It's very hard to tell at this point how many properties are gonna go through the appeal of the grievance. But I will keep it posted and let everybody know. And just to remind everyone, this process was not initiated by the town, it's a state mandate. We do not have control over this.
Yeah, just a clarification.
Sure.
The grievance is, a lot of these issues can be resolved on the grievance level,
The
correct?
rough numbers are that 15% of the people file a grievance. Could be actually a little lower this year.
Okay,
Of the people who go through the grievance process, another 15% then pursue. the,
okay,
thing. There are quorum questions that I don't know if anybody's realized, but with this large body, we can break up into groups of 3
Ah.
to go and look at the properties, and file reports and so forth. And just to remind everyone, there are very specific reasons to grieve and to have a complaint. You have to show that mistakes were made by the listers in terms of the raw data. That's one area. The other is to show that comparable properties are being charged differently than your property. Now, a little confusion on that. Comparable does not mean your neighbor. It means a house approximately the same size, with the same amount of acreage. You know, I think that it's going better than I expected. So
great.
I think
great.
things are.
Well, there's got a lot of good communication coming out from your
Yeah,
office,
I
so
think we're
that's,
fine.
that was good. Yes, Dan?
The lister grievance process, when does that end?
On the 26th.
Okay, so that's later this week, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And then then folks have within 15 days of the end of that to file, or are they filing
Well,
these?
I think that the listers will have an idea of who is filing. You have to file a written petition, I think within 15 days, but we'll get a ballpark soon after the 26th of how many people were grieving to get you guys understanding what it is. My guess would be prior to a select board meeting, we could have a hearing to start the process and then break up into groups of 3, reconvene the meeting,
And from when they file, we have 15 days to have the first meeting?
the first meeting.
Okay, I'll just note, because our next meeting, which falls into this, is the July 14th meeting.
Right,
And we already have the zoning hearing happening the hour before the select board meeting, so.
Okay, well, maybe
I'll
just.
just
we get
note,
that
just
scheduled.
note that as we
Okay, and
plan.
also we might just have a special.
Yeah,
EC.
just trying to figure out the timing of when you'll
Yes.
need us and
Right.
others to.
yeah, Michael,
I have a question for Graham. I'll come over to the owl.
yeah,
One of the things that I've been watching pretty closely and went through the grand list after it was released is how the buyout properties are being treated. And I don't want you to answer in general right now. I just want to say that we have been telling people for a year now that 27 properties are going to go off the tax rolls. And about a third of those properties have negotiated down the value of their property to nearly 0, like 7,000, 15,000. And yet all the properties designated for buyout, we have been told by the state, and we are therefore telling back to the public, have no value. So how, I want to actually do something more formal at the next select board meeting, but the question is, how do you say that a house we've said has 0 value and therefore should be bought out is at the same time worth double its pre-flood value?
Right, I had a rather heated conversation with somebody who was having an issue with this. And I have appealed to Sandy, head lister, for clarification. My understanding is that the FEMA buyout would be the value of the house the day before the flood, correct? In terms of what they're being bought out for?
If they choose to take it.
No, if they choose to take it, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I don't know I don't know, in terms of the listers, how their hands might be tied in terms of the process that's designated by the state. But I will check with Sandy and I'll get something on social media about it.
What probably I would leave as an open question, because we have maybe 3 to 4 properties, maybe 5 that have been approved for buyout where the people are not likely to leave. But we have approved, or the select board has approved, a list of 27 saying these properties shouldn't be lived in, they cannot be resold. I've talked to a number of property owners and they said, there's no way we could put this on the market, but we might stay here. So how do we negotiate that is an open question.
Yeah, and I'll ask Sandy, I do want to just point out that property tax rules are not necessarily just in terms of what people perceive. For example, if you lost 7 acres that is now underwater by the brook, you still pay tax on those 7 acres. It's a difficult question to answer. And people are very upset about those sorts of rules, but I don't know that the rules are necessarily ideally designed. I don't know. I'll find out from Sandy.
Understood. I mean, they can ask for an abatement, and a number of people who did lose acreage did get abatements. So that's part of the process. And I think I'm just open to exploring because our signing the buyout agreement in 2023 or 2024, our meaning the town of Plainfield, would indicate that we saw the existence of that house in the floodplain as being a future danger to the occupants, and therefore it shouldn't be occupied. And if people do choose to live there, it is very much at their own risk. So it has some
Right,
impact
but
on.
just to be clear, I want everybody to understand, we cannot completely abate land. We can change the grade of the land, but land cannot be completely abated, just for
Okay.
clarification.
All right, thank you.
Sounds like further discussion. Any, you have a?
Well, and I'll just note, I know,
Mm.
I think it was in the flood bill, it may have been in the budget on the state legislative level. There's a program that I think, I'm pretty sure went through, I was talking to the state representative about it last week, where the state lost grand list revenue, so this property tax revenue, for 5 years, anything lost on the grand list because of the floods, the state would reimburse us 100% for 5 years and 50% for 5 years. So I don't know, that program still has to be spun up, and there's, I'm sure there's a lot of details, but it is something to look at, partly because it one of these things where we also we want to make sure that depending on how they're valuing homes in that, we wouldn't want to zero these out as non-valuable and then not be able to get this ground list replacement money. So there's lots of different programs to look at, and a lot of this state, we don't have a lot of say in how some of these state rules actually work. We can only work within, like, I don't think someone can, grieve, I was flooded, right? Like, there's very specific things they have to grieve within the process.
I could say as a wishful thinking that I would love it if the town had a uniform policy, because there are people who have highly valued properties that are now being sold, now on the ground list just for the value of the land, because they lost all or part of a building. Other people who have very damaged homes who aren't even living in them, who are being tax appraised for twice the value of what their prior appraisal was. It doesn't feel consistent enough for me to able to say to any of these families, I don't know how to prepare you for what's next, so it's sort of.
Well, and I don't think it's a town policy, right? The listers are following the state policy.
Right.
And so it's not a town has not made a policy that the listers are following. The state has made a policy that the listers are following. So I don't know if we can make a town policy.
And I don't know if we can answer the questions that the listers should be answering.
Well, I just know that some people are very skilled, and it's no harm, it's a good thing, but are skilled at negotiating property appraisal to reflect the loss they actually took. And other people are less skilled at that, are still paying the full value, even though their house isn't even being lived in. So it's clearly a matter of skill, and the hope that I had was that we could look at these properties and say a recommendation perhaps to the lister.
Well,
as
I don't think we can do that because we, as a select board, sit on the Board of Civil Authority. So I don't think we can recommend to ourselves.
Oh, I see.
But what I can say is if they've already grieved because they think it's too high, the listers have a process, and if it stays there, they could appeal. A walkthrough of the home as part of the appeal And so I'm guessing that there are some things that can be done then. I
Yeah.
think people have to just go through the process. I don't think there's a way for us to go around the process.
Right.
I'll come back to it a little bit later.
There is a process. Yep. Yep. Okay, thank you. You're all set, Bram? Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
That's good.
Karen? have
No, yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great, good to see everybody. Sorry to have missed the last meeting. I'm back from family stuff. And I'm brought back my baby girl's germs, so now sick.
I'm
But
glad you're up to them.
any rate, here we are. So wanted to just provide an update because it's been a while and things are progressing moving forward, but there have been a number of significant changes to the grants group over the course of the last several weeks, and I wanted to make sure everyone was aware what was happening. So as most folks know, this group's been meeting since last August. So it's been, good long 10 months plus. And folks have had to step back or make changes based on personal reasons and other commitments. So at the end of this month, Gary Smith has stepped down from being the FEMA PA coordinator. As we know, Gary is a lister and also has family things to tend to. So with Gary stepping away, we also had already seen Michael Zahner step back. It made sense to me to take a look at what was really needed with this group in terms of keeping all of the work moving. And so from this point forward, we're not exactly the grants group. We are the town grants administrator and committees. So from this point forward, I'll be interfacing with FEMA PA and our integrity group consultants who have a really good handle on what's being done and getting all the projects submitted into the FEMA portal. And we have a weekly check-in. And so I feel pretty confident that all of that is in good shape. I know that Josh and Keith Cubbin are working diligently on the federal highway grants and the projects associated there. And I check in with Josh regularly to see what support he may need. I am also going to be working with Pat Moulton and the folks from the East Village expansion project, along with a consultant to be named that will be funded through the Ready Group at VHCB on the Community Development Block Grant DR fund application. What we know about that at this point is that there will be a pre-application required. We didn't know that before last week. We know that now. I'll be talking with Pat this week to try and get a regular meeting scheduled with her, and Arian should be back from his trip this week as well. So we'll be convening to get the pre-application work done. We're hoping that VHCB will give us one or two names of consultants who are ready to work with us. It sounded like they had those, but there was some question about pre-application requirements and such. And so we're ironing those things out, but hoping to have somebody on board to really take the helm of this grant application. And we'll work with that person to make sure they have everything they need. Any of the other grants that have been in play, things that money we've gotten from the Vermont Community Foundation and other sources, I'll still oversee and make sure that we're doing the reporting and the things that are needed there. But beyond what I've just named to you, I'm not going to be able to take on anything else. So what I would like to put forward, and I think you guys have this on your agenda, is that it might be a good idea to put the word out to the community that an assistant grants administrator could be helpful. Because we know that there are other grants that are available, and I just don't have the bandwidth. And so if there's another person that could be brought on to support those kind of grant applications, that would be really wonderful. So, however I can help get that done, that'd be great, but I'm hoping because it's an appointment and because, you know, Michael Zonner's gone and that was his position and now Gary's gone. So we've got some movement and we have some positions that are open, but I think the assistant one would be a good one to fill if we could. So that's kind of the where we are. If you have any questions, let me know.
Yeah, Dan has a question.
Yeah, Karen, the assistant grants manager, whatever the role is, would that be something that you'd be able to put together like a job description, including like hours required or something to give someone a sense of what they would be agreeing to?
I guess so. Sorry. I'm not even sure that there is a job description for the grants administrator, honestly.
Yeah, just a sense of how much time and effort you're hoping for.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that if someone has an interest, we can tailor it to what they can do. You know, that's what we've done with all the other jobs, is to say what's your skill and how much time do you have, and then we'll take that. But mostly what we need, you know, we are aware that there are like the Arts Council grants, and there are other smaller grants that are more that are a more simple process than, say, federal grants, which are monsters. That if someone has worked in a nonprofit and has done any kind of grant writing, could probably step into that role and then work with the folks who are seeking those grants. Like Michael could probably speak to this, but like the Disability Committee has targeted a number of grants that could be helpful there at the Opera House. But they could use someone who could help pull that together. And there might be, and Jamie from the Arts Committee might have, for Arts and Recreation might have some grants that could be pursued if someone had the time to be able to help write those. So it's a matter of the ones that kind of show up. That could be, you know, there's even the co-op, right? The co-op building, and there was the Preservation Vermont grants. You know, it's things, there's a lot of grants that get in play. And so it's just, if someone has that kind of experience and interest, we can, and it could be more than one person, you know, it's like, if you just want to hop on, we could use the help.
Yep, that's great. We'll take note of that and try to advertise that. Michael, you had a thought?
More than I thought. Michael Billingsley. I had aware of a number of grants that are in play, and as Karen rightly said, some of them are for town hall. Very specifically, one is to air condition this room, which I've already spec'd out and would be about 22,000. Another is to pay the other half of a grant that I think might successfully be funded by the Arts Council. It's already been written by Keith Swan for 20,000, which is half the cost of a lift to replace this one, which needs replacing. And they would require that we match half of it, so we need to find the other 20,000. And I discussed some of this loosely with the Vermont Community Foundation, and they brought up the idea that they would be willing to fund as a capacity building bonus for the town of Plainfield in this particular time frame where we're still struggling to fund a position called Assistant Grants Administrator. So if Karen were to write a job description that would say maybe a half-time position or something like that, Karen, and then I've already helped Alice Merrill, the prior grants administrator, write 2 grants that were both substantial, and I would help that person write these other grants that are in play. I don't want them to fall apart, and I definitely know that we need to have these works done in town hall. This room would become insufferably hot if we had another 2 days of heat, you know, so what I hope is that, yes, such a person will step forward in the town, but yes, we also might be able to find a way to fund them. So
Great,
I encourage that approach.
thank you.
And I just would say also that at this point, what I'm aware of is that there's, I think the board approved $8,000 as a stipend for the town grants administrator, effective July 1, right? So that fund is there. So, you know, and however you want to do this, I haven't actually there was a $4,000 stipend that was like last year's money that we used in the first 3 months or whatever it was. So, you know, if, you know, this is something that the board feels is important to fund, and we can get the funding through the Vermont Community Foundation, be good to put it in that stipend line or some other line that could be used to compensate folks who are doing the work. So, I mean, for me, it's
Great.
like, I want to be able to get this done and move things forward, and then, but ultimately, you know, not looking for a job. So it'd be great to have something set up so someone who is looking for a job, you know, could move into it and then actually be compensated for it.
Yep. We count on a lot of volunteers in this town.
Yeah,
I also want to bring you up to speed, Karen, on and Michael, the dam project. Apparently there was some future, I had signed the document to allow for the removal of the dam. And they had some rework on it. I had to re-sign it Saturday because it's due today, yesterday, I guess, or today. So anyway, it's moving forward, it's fully funded. And it's a matter of getting the steps in place that will make that happen. So just want you to know that's in the works too.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Thank you.
Glad you're back.
thank you, Karen. Feel
Me
better.
too. Bye. Thanks.
Okay, Captain, we have a discussion about our a discussion with Captain Deborah Munson and S.A. Donnelly.
Well, so if people can hear you in the room, which they probably can, is anywhere near here, this is the speaker for Zoom.
Yeah.
You could
This is
move
just for when
into-
we have bigger
move into
meetings.
these 2 seats, and you can,
Yeah,
Oh, okay. We can add a seat.
we can.
Yeah,
see-
or
Why don't we do that? It's a little more comfortable.
yeah. Or we can just move them up closer.
Yeah.
Let's move them in a little bit so we can make sure.
That Zoom picks up there.
Yeah.
Don't want to have you, make you stand there.
The transcriber, if you could say you are, or you, that helps a lot.
Thank you for coming.
And so, Captain Deb Munson, I oversee the age group. I'll just do intros first before we get into anything.
Okay,
I'm Michelle Donnelly. I'm the state's attorney for Washington County.
And my name is TJ Howard. I'm the station commander here in Berlin.
thank you all for coming.
So I reached out, probably almost 2 months ago now at this point,
Yes,
because I just stepped into this position approximately 2 months ago. And so I also came into this position realizing that there may have been a strained relationship between the law enforcement side of things due to a recent case that had happened. And granted, we can't talk about the case in itself tonight. I would like to introduce ourselves. This is who we are. This is what we do. These are our intentions. And move forward together, understanding that we are all growing from a case that probably didn't have the outcome that anybody wanted,
understood.
if that's a proper way to.
That's a good way to say it. Yes,
So like I said, I'm not new to the state police. I'm almost on 15 years. I transferred over about 2 months ago into the 8 Troop Commander position, which oversees all of the northern half barracks. So I used to be in a position where I oversaw a lot of specialties. I oversaw our special operations unit. So it's very highly skilled people on what they do. They're all of our special teams that go out to all these major scenes. And now I've transferred over to overseeing a lot of people management, which is a very different
oh, yeah.
position. I'm sure there's folks in this room that understand that. And so I'm taking a deep dive into our barracks and how things are run in each barracks. I've known TJ for his entire career. And so working together with him very closely to build these relationships up, expect more of our troopers, even though we're doing it with less. I think everybody is doing that these days as well. And just maintaining, I think his name was Dan, he said it in the beginning, a lot of things are attributed to just poor communication. And I think we can all certainly do a lot better with that. And that's part of why we came here today, is to just instill that communication, ensure that we do have open doors. I'm available, unfortunately, 24/7. But I carry my cell phone with me wherever I go. My email is always up and running. And we're very approachable people, despite that maybe some preconceptions that some may have had. And so we just want to encourage, if something doesn't look right, doesn't sound right, maybe just have not a right feel, just please reach out to us. Because from my level, I may not even have an understanding either.
Mhm.
So getting TJ, myself, or SA Donnelly in on something that we may not understand or know is a problem, from the beginning, we could probably fix it pretty quick,
Hmm.
as opposed to when something is all said and done.
Yeah, okay. That's great to know. Thank you for being open. One of the questions I have is, we've had a few issues over the years.
Donnelly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, she did say her name.
Well, I guess, do you want to say anything?
Oh,
about,
oh, sorry.
What you do, your role in this? And not to put you on the spot, but I thought that was what was happening.
Certainly. So I'm the state's attorney for Washington County. And so that makes me the chief law enforcement officer for the county. And we prosecute cases after they are given to us by law enforcement. The investigations typically are complete by the time we see them, and my office looks at what happened, determines what the appropriate charge is, and then those are arraigned. They go to criminal court, where somebody will have access to a defense attorney, and then the case proceeds from there. And it kind of, similar to how Dan was talking about it earlier this evening, is like you try to work out a resolution between the prosecution and the defense. Both of you bringing what you think are the best aspects of your side. The defense might point out weaknesses in the state's case. The state might bring out the need for responsibility, and then we try to come to an outcome. I would echo what Captain Munson said about communication earlier in the process. If there is, if somebody is a victim in a case, or if they're a community member that has an interest in a particular outcome, getting involved earlier and letting that thought process known to somebody in my office, if they think that there's an issue or a particular outcome that you think is very important for a case to have. It's important to know that earlier in the process, because we take that into consideration too. Every case that has a victim, we have a victim's advocate in our office, and we reach out to and talk to victims about their perspective and what they are hoping to see in a case outcome. And those voices are really important. And then, for community level crime, there are some crimes that don't have a particularized victim, but might be affecting the community as a whole. Those comments can also be funneled to our office, because we want to take all of that into consideration when we're having resolutions. Every case is its own individual microcosm of something that it's the one event that happened, but sometimes it can be representative of a lot of different issues that are bubbling up in the community. So we want to know that context, because that helps us make the most appropriate response, and one that's going to be the most effective.
Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
We were just doing some intros, is kind of who we are.
Okay. Sorry, I'm the watch commander tonight, so it's just answering phone calls for the most part. Yeah, so my name's TJ. I work in Berlin, been down here since April of 24. I've met most of the town management in preparation for the elections last November. So that was a good opportunity to at least introduce myself. Most of it was over the phone. Just trying to get to every town in Washington County is not an easy task in a short period of time. Prior to coming to Berlin, my specialty in the state was crash investigations. That's what I did as my full-time job. Basically doing fatal crashes around the state.
Mhm.
So yeah, born and raised in Massachusetts, been up here for a number of years.
Okay.
Happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Okay. Thank you. I did have a kind of a policy kind of check question, and that is if there are recurring things happening that seem to require state police as opposed to, say, the sheriff. If there, I guess I guess I would like to know, first of all, you like to build a file, I know that. If there's recurring issues in the town, you would like to have us communicate with you so you can build a file and eventually have a case, perhaps.
That's a very broad question.
Yeah, my problem is I don't know what things to bring to you and what things to bring to you and what things to bring to the sheriff's office.
So
What kind
can
of-
you also contract with the sheriff's office?
Yes,
Is that correct?
Yeah.
What, do you know what their contract is for? What's their are they here for patrol, traffic?
primarily traffic related. Yeah,
Primarily
yeah.
traffic. So if there is something that is, I'll use an example. When I was a station commander up in the Derby Barracks, we had reoccurring issues in a particular town surrounding, it sounds something similar to, I don't know what's going on Bean Road, but it. That's definitely
Recurring issue.
We have like, we had some reoccurring issues in a particular residence in this
Mhm.
particular town. And it got to a point where we were receiving phone calls from the community all the time. And so finally the town came up with kind of a funneling system to get some information, excuse me, to us. So that way we could ease that communication
Mm.
easier and quicker. And so a lot of the communication for those types of complaints came through the town, and then we worked together, state police and with the town, and they had a sort of a constable of getting paperwork issued, and trying to come together, almost on a monthly basis to talk about some reoccurring issue to try and resolve it. And eventually it did get resolved, and they're probably still trying to recoup fees.
Yeah, the other one I'm thinking about is involve a firearm, which I know would be in your department,
Mhm.
and recurring threats and so forth. So if something like that was happening, you'd definitely
Yes,
want to
we
know
would like
about
to
it.
know, and from the witnesses, from the people who that's affecting or have that information,
Okay.
we'd like to know. We can start cases. If it's not something that is indicative of a response, it's just something that people would like us to know.
Right,
We can still start information calls, and all that stuff can be filtered through the local barracks. as
that's
well.
what I'm thinking
Yeah,
about. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. We don't like to get it to a point where it demands a visit,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, we
ideally.
take all that information, and Lieutenant Howard can probably speak a little bit more to that if need be, but we can certainly, anyone can call in with that information.
Okay,
But if it's something like this Bean Road, where there's a ton of information that's coming in and compiled, town can compile it and send it over to us.
I'd also want to express my thanks because we also are in the position of needing wellness checks. And state police has performed several of those on my request, particularly with families in the Bean Road, more rural area. And they've always been very responsive, very skilled, and when necessary, will help us collaborate with other police departments.
Oh, thank you.
yeah.
That's testament to today's shot there. Thank you. Thanks.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, I mean, not that we're gonna, I don't need to speak to the actual what happened in the case, because you all can't do that, but I will say, like, we found out the end result of the case, and we're not happy with what it seems like a very light sentence for someone who injured someone very grievously, and this person hasn't been able to work full-time since. And we reached out to the state's attorney's office, and I'm looking at the email here, where it was kind of acknowledged that there were some evidentiary shortcomings, and that their shortcomings are being addressed with BSP Berlin leadership as training issues for a new trooper. And so it's like, okay, well, there's a new trooper, there were problems. When we reached out to the state police, we got a letter basically saying that they investigated it and no wrongdoing was done whatsoever, and that there was no training issue. And so, like, I think some of that kind of miscommunication feels like state attorney said it was a state police issue, and then the state police actually in the letter said basically the state attorney just didn't charge for enough. I mean, it's one of the things
Yeah,
that
I
it's
think we
at.
can all acknowledge that any given day, we can do better.
Yeah,
I think, and that's something that I think we can all acknowledge, and pretty much anything we do,
Mhm.
always do better. And like we've said, there are things that we could do better on, absolutely. And one of those things is communication. One of those things is communication internally within the barracks, so we know what each other is doing, so we can help if we need to. Other troopers can help. I think we all know that there's staffing shortages everywhere, and
Mhm.
people are just trying to trying to get through the day and get through things. And if that communication, even between the troopers themselves, is slightly lacking, some things don't get as good of a job as others.
Mhm.
So that certainly something that we're improving on, and that's part of what I do is I come in and we've met with TJ and the barracks of, we have to step this up, we have to do better. Our communication, first and foremost, when Dan said it, I'm like, yep, that's the backbone of it. We have to do better with our communicating. And especially with newer troopers that may not have the experience, we expect them to communicate. And we expect people to communicate with them on how to do the best that they can and get through that. And not let that fall through the cracks where might not have an ideal outcome.
Yeah. Graham?
I just want to thank the captain and lieutenant and the district attorney for showing up. I wrote some very angry email to all of you. I'm sure you've received it. I think just your showing up here means a lot. And I just want to say that I think that there are, in terms of communication, there are challenges with our community. We had a very, very high profile individual who gamed the system, committed a lot of violent acts, and literally terrorized the community for many years. So this is the context with which, unrelated to the case that happened. So when you suffer through that and then you see somebody walk, it gets very frustrating. Now, I think I would love to establish, especially with our constable, a route of communication. I'll give you an example of a situation where we have called the state police. And it's one of these very difficult areas because we have a mentally ill individual who, for the past 7 years, dumps food. He believes he's feeding the animals. Now that sort of sounds a little funny, but it gets not very funny because it puts dogs in danger, attracts rodents. We have a rodent problem. And we really haven't, and we've gone through Washington County Mental Health. I've talked to the state police about it. But once again, this is an example of a kind of a quality of life issue where somebody kind of brazenly does this craziness and nothing's done. So I think if we could establish lines of communication, and when there is a high profile case in the community, somebody's injured and this and that, there should be a point person who explains what's going on, either from the police point of view or the district attorney point of view, because finding out after the fact a result that's not going to be satisfactory is also really frustrating. So once again, thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to building addressing issues. I don't know, is Nicole on the call? No. Okay. There was an incident actually this past week where, and I asked the person to come to the meeting regarding having to do with response time. They felt they were in a dangerous situation, and there wasn't a call back for 4 or 5 hours. Now, I understand you have, I mean, I remember I looked at the number of officers assigned to Middlesex Barracks a number of years ago. And although there were 15 on the roster, there were really only 9 people working because of injury or whatever it was. And I think that if there is this severely dire resource need, the town might be hopeful in being your advocates, because a 5-hour response time to a critical situation, that might represent the fact that you just don't have the manpower or person power to address the issue. So once again, look forward to being in dialogue and also perhaps advocating on your behalf in terms of what the needs are.
If you get things such as that, here's your point person right here.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Yes, I will.
I'm volunteering, PJ.
Well, the email's on the website, my email address, and a lot of people reach out. I'm pretty candid and transparent. And so I'll tell you how it is, you know, given the response times. I can't really speak to it right now because I don't know what else was going on. Staffing absolutely was a challenge for a very long period of time. Almost to the point of I hated saying it to people because it started to sound a little cliche. But it was a real challenge for us for a number of months, particularly in late last year into early this year. And so that certainly is a factor in a lot of things. Speaking to the bread thrower, I remember someone did reach out to our office about that. And there's only so much we can do. We can only enforce the laws that are on the books. And so that is a bit of a sticky wicket. I reached out to the wardens to see if it was, you know, we could, I want to say frame it, but are they baiting animals when they shouldn't be and something like that? But there really isn't an appropriate statute that kind of fits that issue. And so all we can do is try to bring all the, you know, community partners together to see what can be done, if anything. I talked to Washington County Mental Health, I wouldn't say once a week, but pretty darn close on a number of different issues. And there's only so much they can do at times, right? They can only offer resources if people want them. So I want to kind of front load you with, I'm open to dialogue, but recognize there's a lot of limitations in Vermont. There are only certain laws and there aren't a ton of them. So a lot of it sometimes comes to the state police as this backstop for community problems, but oftentimes it's not really a law enforcement issue. All we're doing is trying to get people in communication with somebody else to try to resolve it.
Well, I would say that, I certainly agree with a lot of what you said. But I would note that this individual's behavior has gradually graduated to being potentially very dangerous. There was one incident where it was a near assault of a resident who was complaining to him about throwing, and it's not just bread. This is somebody who is taking leftovers or buying food, meat, bacon, salads, pasta. I mean, this is really not, this isn't somebody just throwing a few breadcrumbs.
And this is where I would say that it requires, as TJ said, some community resources wrapping around this person, because it may not be the law side that can do something. It may not be just the mental health side, but coming together and having a discussion about this, of what we can do, what resources are available, might start towards a resolution, as where if it's one entity in and of itself may not be able to do anything, but if you pool the resources, like TJ said, maybe we can pull those resources together and have a discussion about what can be done. That could be a solution to that. Or the start of one. Sounds like a pretty long history of an issue that I don't think is gonna have an overnight solution, but starting that discussion might start that. That would be my suggestion.
And I only say that because, you know, it's just one person in one community. Me and Michelle, there's another individual in Waterbury who's a tremendous drain on every resource in that town. And it was just a week or 2 weeks ago, we were talking about what can we do to try to stop this, right? It doesn't really fit perfectly into any bucket, but it's us just trying to come up with a game plan, which is what's the best thing we can do to try something. And we'll try it, and if it works, great, and if it doesn't, we come back together and we'll try something new. But I apologize if I misspoke. It's when I first heard about this individual, I think it was him or her throwing bread. And so I think it's just recognize that you have to bring it to our attention. If you don't get the response that you'd like from a particular trooper, and frankly, it could be someone from another office that doesn't know the backs, you know, one of the big issues we had from last year into this year was most days and nights, it wasn't necessarily personnel from Berlin responding to these calls. So they didn't really have the historical knowledge of the frequent people we deal with all the time. It could be someone from Royalton, Westminster, St. Johnsbury. So they show up and they hear a name that all of us would be like, oh, okay, like we've had this pattern history with them. It's just another person, right? And they hear they're throwing meat on the side of the road and they go, okay, like doesn't seem like a big deal, right? Because they don't really recognize that. So those are the sorts of challenges that maybe you guys aren't aware of that, maybe hopefully this will be illustrative for you all. But as the captain said, just reach out, like it's not that plenty of towns already do. Sometimes they don't always like the outcome, but all we can do is talk about it and see what we can try, so.
I also think that this particular situation sounds like the individual involved might have some other issues going on. You mentioned at the start of it that there might be a lot of mental health issues.
Absolutely.
And that can be challenging, you know, if you're looking for a police and then a criminal justice response, that might not be like the route to accountability that you might be looking for. Because if someone has mental health issues to the point that they might not be criminally responsible for their actions, because they might have it, like that could in the end be an issue of competency or sanity. And so it could be that VSP does respond, they respond beautifully, they write up a case, they issue a citation, they send it to my office, we say we agree, a crime has occurred here, and we charge it. And then that person comes to court and someone says, this person can't participate in the criminal justice system because they don't have the mental capacity to do so. They're declared incompetent, and then we can't legally proceed with that case. And then there's not a legal outcome from my office, and I would end up dismissing those charges because there's just no legal way to hold somebody responsible if they're not competent, or if they were not sane at the time that they committed that offense. And so while I can absolutely recognize that this could be really upsetting at a community level, could be wreaking havoc, could be causing safety problems for the neighbors or the entire town, and be really concerning, it could also be possible that the criminal justice system, like the police and the prosecution, aren't going to really be an available solution to that problem. In the end, even if we went down that road and everybody jumped into line and did their jobs just right, it could still be that isn't going to be an outcome there, and a different resource might be more appropriate.
In a similar vein, we do also, another thing that has been brought to my attention by a number of residents, we have an issue of people using drugs in the park and ride and defecating around that, sleeping overnight. I'm sure we're not unique in this challenge. Do you have a recommendation on how to proceed with that kind of problem?
I mean, I think that you know, drug use in public places is something that many communities in Vermont are facing, are really upset about, that it doesn't feel safe, it doesn't feel like their community. And so I think there can be a law enforcement response to that. In Plainfield in particular, it might be, you know, it might be hard to patrol that area the way that like some more common areas in municipalities that have their own police departments, because you're all of Washington County that don't have a municipal police department are essentially sharing the singular resource of the Berlin barracks. And so if you are noticing an uptick of that, and that it's having this response, I think that it's possible, you know, bringing it to the attention of the Berlin barracks that there is increased drug use here, and we'd like to see it policed. And, you know, if there are resources to send a trooper out there, and to occasionally, so that people know that this isn't an area that's not going to be welcoming to that. If people are committing crimes, then those can be charged by the Berlin barracks and sent to my office, where we will charge and look for an appropriate resolution.
Mhm. I'd like to offer acknowledgement that coming here is a step toward relationship building. Relationship building is a step toward better communication. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is a piece of the puzzle. Yeah, I can also understand you spoke to the staffing challenges. That's real, that's happening. I mean, I think I want to just acknowledge that it might ring hollow to the family of the person affected by the event that brought you here. That, you know, there were communication issues. It was not brought up in time. It could ring hollow to this family. And so I think I want to ask two questions. One, are there insurance? Is there insurance that the state police carries or the state's attorney's office carries for on behalf of families who like fell through the system? And or is there an appeal process that could reopen this on behalf of the family who is so deeply affected by the event that brought you all here?
So sorry,
You go for it.
I'll answer the second question
Yeah.
first. No, there wouldn't be an appeal process. This was done by a plea agreement. There'd be some very limited appeal. Right, there are very limited appeal rights that are all held by the defendant in that situation. I will also say though, without going into too much detail about this case, is that we have a victim's advocate in our office. So we had a deputy state's attorney assigned to this case, and the victim had their own attorney. And we did communicate with all of those people before resolving the case. And then again after, and it was confirmed to our office that they understood what the resolution was, that they agreed with it and approved of it. And the only indication that I got that anybody was unhappy with this was after it had already been resolved by the town, not by the individual who was affected. The individual who was affected, their only communication to our office was that they understood what was the outcome and that they approved of it. And so, you know, while I can understand why the town and you know, friends and community members of this person are disappointed in that outcome, that wasn't communicated to us until afterwards, and to this day has never been communicated to us by the actual person who, you know, the victims do have some rights in Vermont, and those rights were all honored, and the process was all honored in this situation, and the information we got back was that it was approved, that they were in agreement. I forgot. the
Insurance.
first question.
Insurance?
No.
Okay, I mean, thank you for clarifying. Thank you for
Yeah.
clarifying.
I think it's important to point out that I think your office should communicate with the victim himself, because I think, judging by what the victim told me, and judging by what you're saying, the person who's in charge of advocating for the victim did a complete disservice. You should not hold that position. That's my feeling about it.
You know, and I can understand that. When people are represented by attorneys though, and like I myself am an attorney, and the attorneys in my office and the people who work for me, then, you know, both the victims advocates and then the attorneys were, the professional rules of conduct say that when a party is represented, that we're required to speak to the attorney and not to the party. And so it was represented to us that they were represented by an attorney. And so we are required to speak to that attorney, because otherwise we'd be.
Right, except what I'm telling you is that the victim explained to me that he told a number of things to your office's victim advocate that don't seem to have been passed on to you. And that's something that are examined that's on your end. That's not his attorney. I
Okay.
would really look into that.
It's communication. Yeah.
It comes right down to that,
Yeah.
and I think we can all do a bit better. Email, certainly, we lose a tone, we lose context, we lose background information. In person, we gain physical expression, we gain a tone, we gain some personal relationships that help
conversations through as well. So sometimes shooting an email to say, hey, can we meet? Might be the start. Or, hey, I heard this, can you get back to me? Maybe we can meet up, maybe we can chat about this. I heard this, I heard that. How about we just have a little conversation at some point before it gets to people being upset or not understanding a background and context to things. And again, like I said, we could always do better with our communication. And if something is missed in that timeline of things, maybe better communication from every one of us could help pick that up.
So,
Well, I'll also say thank you very much for being here and expressing what you're expressing to us, and we appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Any
For
other-
having us. I know none of this conversation is easy for anybody, so
Well, it's always comes down to personal situation and the pain that we know people feel, and I know you deal with it every day, so you're not surprised, but if we can communicate with you and there's issues that we're concerned about, or we can talk to you, and that's the,
it's gonna be Lieutenant Howard.
Yep.
If you don't get a response where he's not available or something that you don't agree with or don't want, I'm always available second.
well, that's very appreciated.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you guys.
I think-
Thank you.
Do you have any thoughts for us? Any questions?
No, I think it's good that we got to stop down, just meet all you guys.
Yeah.
Because it's, the challenges and concerns that you guys have are the same in almost every single town.
I imagine.
So it's, you certainly aren't unique like that. And all we can do is take it one step at a time, right? So, getting to at least, meet all of you guys in person is important.
Well, be aware, we're grateful for the work you do.
Yeah.
You know, we know it's difficult and at times scary and all that, but we'll just keep talking about issues.
I will send all of you just a follow email with Dan Caddy, who's our constable, very capable person, as you've heard. Just so you have his number, you know, there's some sort of relationship.
That was Dan, that was.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he's National Guard, so he's sometimes deployed away, but.
That'd be great.
I'd like to also.
About him. Because I sensed a military nature.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a little nonsense.
There is something familiar about
He's taking charge of that Bean Road situation.
it.
So I think you all should know him, so forth, so I'll send that email.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
my email again, like TJ said, all our contacts on the website, but please, you've got it. Feel free to share it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
good evening.
Thanks for coming. Next item is the EVEAC report. Do we have anyone here?
I don't see anybody from Mediac.
I don't see anybody.
Right?
They did, I will mention, Christy Grant last week did email all of us an update.
Yes.
That was
And I think-
minutes.
Well, their minutes, yeah, well, it's a pretty good summary too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have like the top things that happened at the beginning and then minutes. And they will be doing that after every meeting, so.
I mean, one note about Eviac, Jared Birchmore reached out with a letter of resignation. It was
Oh, right. Yeah.
with reservation, with like, you know, life situation. So, I mean, I'm hoping that we receive from the chairs a nomination for
Mhm.
us to appoint to fill out that committee again.
That would be the right way to handle it, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's no action on that now, but just to
Well,
make sure everybody was aware that,
I'll know when we were doing the appointment process, we were down to the last spot and Jared was one person as a flood affected potential buyer. And Eli
Eli was another one.
Barrow was another who was in the same position, so maybe we.
yeah,
When you talk to him.
we need to talk to him because,
Yeah.
you know, Eli's consent on the matter matters.
We'll just, he's not here. We can,
Yeah,
We can
we'll just appoint him. No, I just meant that
we
there
can
may
appoint
be a-
anybody.
yeah.
yeah, no, that's a good idea. I thought of that too, because there were two of them and what they kind of.
Yeah.
went Either way.
Right.
Emergency management report.
Hi there.
Hi.
Part one, the introduction.
Part one, yes, thank you. Frank.
The introduction.
Correct. I'm gonna sit here. I have, just for the townspeople and for the record and for the recording, I wanted to make a couple of observations that hopefully will be helpful to everyone. There's so many people who have been affected by the flood. So many people have not resolved what they would hope to be a final outcome for themselves and I'm trying to speak to that to some extent, but we also have some looming problems, one of which is capturing my attention more than others. So I thought I'd focus on that one thing tonight. As a little bit of an announcement, I would say that a lot of the work that I do wouldn't be possible without the volunteers that I have working on my team. And it not only includes Liz Bicknell, who's on the meeting today, but also I have to do a shout out for Stephen and Rita Abel, who have lost a house in this last flood completely, and nonetheless are constantly doing outreach on behalf of the neighbors that are still dealing with some kind of trauma associated with that. And the biggest part of that work on Brook Road, and I'm going to specifically talk only about the Great Brook tonight, is that the Cochran family has been very frequently surfacing because of various complications in their lives that are made much worse by the flood or being displaced by the flood. And I was with Corey Cochran on the 3rd of June today when he died, this month when he died. And he and Stephen and Tina were his support system. And it was remarkable in a way that he was able to pass peacefully. So I just want people to know that. He also was a huge volunteer for the town, although very unsung, often notifying us of things that were going on in the back roads that we otherwise would not have known about, where he was concerned about the impact on someone else. So that said, I want to jump into what I'm focusing on, which is the section of the Great Brook between Brook Road Bridge in the village, number 21, and the Mill Street Bridge. And the reason I want to do that is because the history of that stretch of brook means it still merits not only a tremendous amount of attention, but also that a lot of caution. I will probably find myself evacuating people from the houses alongside that brook. And I wonder if you could put up the slide that I sent one of you, please.
Momentarily.
Okay. Thank you. And here in the room, I'm going to use a pointer, but people will not be able to see this if you're online.
Let me try to reduce.
Pull back far enough so all
Yeah,
the white
I'm
outline
gonna
houses are
disappear this.
visible. There you go.
Sorry.
Yeah, almost. There you go. Yeah, whoop.
It is
The houses are
close enough.
all right. That's just do with that. This section between what was the uppermost, you see the white X's. Those white X's represent houses that have been completely made uninhabitable by the flooding. So when we talk about the restoration of this area, or when we talk about the future dangers in this area, we're not terribly worried about the impact on those houses because they're already a lost cause. So that includes, and I'm just going to use first names for this because if you know who they are, then you do. Is Sarah's house, Michael and Yoko's house, and Susan Grimaldi's house, and where Hope Metcalf is living now, Pat's house. And then further down, people are living in the houses that are in solid white. This is the important thing I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. So then there are two different families living in Art's house here on Hudson, and then Peter and Lauren there, and Claudia, Christiana and Walker here, Robert and his son here, and Jane and Owen here. Then there are several other houses that are completely demolished, including the Heartbreak, which I guess I didn't mark, but it's there. The multiple houses that are completely unusable. My concern has been and continues to be for the people that live in those houses. The reason they're there is not because they feel safe living there. It is because they are forced to live there through the fact they put their house into the buyout program. They've been told they've been tentatively approved. And yet at the same time, it may be a year before they see that money. And if there are further changes in Washington that are detrimental, they might never see that money. But they are told that their house will be repeatedly endangered by flooding. it's not just that it's in the floodplain, but the brook is acting differently. And the fact that the brook acts differently is not just an outcome of the flood in July last year. It's also due to the fact that a number of changes were made by human beings to the brook. The first was one that Carl's very familiar with, was that the temporary bridge put in at the beginning of August, actually towards the middle of the end of July on Mill Street, was too low. And our first major rain event following that was on August 8th. So about 3.5 weeks after the July flood, we got a new rainfall, and the rain came up to within 8 inches of the bottom of that bridge, and it was only 1.5 inches. And so that was so alarming that pulling a group of people together, the decision was made to raise the bridge, and that work was done in October. So that damage and that potential impediment to the brook was removed. It not only will be less likely to catch debris, but it also won't force the bridge won't force the brook to spread sideways when the brook reaches high water. And that would, of course, do quite a bit of damage to the houses that people are still living in there. There are 22 people living in the houses that are outlined in white. So that's a lot of people, including 4 children. And what I can say is I'm thinking about them a lot, and I interview them and talk with them about how they're feeling at the present. I got texts today from several of those families. It's an ongoing process of partly anxiety, partly the pain of the past, and partly wanting their kids to be safe. So we have those factors that keep sort of driving me. And so what happened in December, again, not necessarily something that everyone in town is aware of, is we had about 5 inches of snow on the ground. We had a day of warm weather, and then we had rain. And that was only 1.85 inches of rain. But the combination of a day of melting and 1.85 inches of rain meant that the brook came up behind the houses on the Hudson. Let me just point out where that is. And you could do it too, Francis Rose.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
point out where.
In that area where the back of Peter and Lauren's house and the back of Art Edelstein's house. And what happened is that the water came so high with less than 2 inches that it was literally lapping on Peter's greenhouse. In other words, completely covered his lawn, came up about 1.5 feet. So I then sent an alarm call out to Joe Flynn, who is the head of VTrans. And the reason I chose to bring it to his attention, and I sent copies of this to all the select board at the time, was that in August, some active party, perhaps a Plainfield resident, perhaps not, called VTrans and said, you've got to get all the debris out of the brook. Now, the Plainfield Select Board did not request this. Agency of Natural Resources did not request this. We could not control it. We had a lot of difficulty communicating with the crews. They would not reveal who they were working for. And what has happened is that after discussing it with Joe Flynn, kind of got an idea of who called when, why they went out there, and why, in a sense, they ignored the natural barriers in the stream that are created by woody debris. Those barriers slow the brook down. And as George Springston has so eloquently explained to me, all of those bars and gravel beds and collapsed trees and stuff actually still act as a break, and the break for the water. So removing all that in August turned the 2.5 mile stretch, the steepest part of Great Brook down to the lower village that's depicted here, turned that into a water slide. So if 3 inches of rain falls in the upper part of the brook, it arrives in the village as a lump of water less than 20 minutes later. Whereas in the past, if 3 inches of rain fell in the upper part of the brook, it would be filtered through all those different barriers, and it would arise as a slow building crest and then drop again, and it wouldn't be a danger. It is what it is. We couldn't have them put the woody debris back in. We asked for some kind of assistance. They finally hired a river engineer after 3 weeks of removing debris. They brought in a river engineer who looked at what they were doing, saying, why are you taking all this woody debris out? I now know that engineer is somebody who's very friendly to the interests of the town. And they slowed down the removal of all the debris completely. But as it stands, it is pretty scary what the brook does when water falls on it. So December 18th, that high water event that I mentioned a little bit earlier with the thaw, which followed only an inch and 0.85, that could repeat itself next week. It could repeat itself in 2 weeks with 3 inches of rain, and we would actually see people having to be gotten out. On December 18th. I evacuated that part of the village and I put them back up into shelter Goddard because they weren't safe. Some of them went to hotels, some of them went to the shelter. And we would need to do that again and perhaps repeatedly unless something were done. So I was told that nothing would be done until we finished our Great Brook scoping study, which is something that Josh and Michael Zahner got the funding for.
Yeah.
And that's not due to be in our hands until at the very earliest, the end of August. So I was kind of upset because I got a letter, not upset isn't the right word, but my concerns increased because the head of environmental conservation, Julie Moore, wrote me a letter on the 17th of February saying, unfortunately, there is not a near-term river management project or intervention that will make much of the difference in the village when there is significant multiple inch precipitation. And then she said, maybe what I should do is just practice evacuations with the people who live along the brook and make sure they can get out quickly because that's the best they could offer. So I kind of gave up at that point, thinking that we were on the lurch. And then as Carl knows, out of the blue, in April, we received an email from the Agency of Natural Resources that they had actually assigned at the request of Environmental Conservation, which is the boss of Agency of Natural Resources. They had been assigned to study the Great Brook and to determine if there was any kind of strategy that would improve our chances of surviving a rainfall like this. It was a totally great thing to hear, but that was the first time we knew they were even working after 4 months of them doing so. And their first recommendation was surprising to me because it hadn't even occurred to me. What I had asked them to do is on the south bank, which is the part that is where Jenny's house is, destroyed, the orange house, that on the south bank, if there is a retaining wall along the river that is 6 feet high, and because the river can't go in that direction, the brook can't go in that direction, it's forced to go.
Where did it go?
I don't know.
Just, and stop the share. It's,
Just
and then you try to share again, it might
Share
be
again.
still,
Okay.
then it's still in the email
Oh,
window, so it's.
okay, so give me,
I'll keep summarizing.
Well,
Yeah, keep
while we're
summarizing.
chasing this down.
Yeah.
So,
There.
this is really good information. I know it's about protecting people. What actions can the select board take at this point? Or you just want to get us aware of where you're headed?
Well, the reason I'm doing this tonight is because they're doing a meeting again on the 9th of June.
Oh, okay,
And I know there's no select board meeting before that.
yeah.
So I wanted at the very least to have a select board member at that meeting. And I think Carl,
Gotcha.
you're the one who's likely to be able to do that.
Yeah, I did say that. That'd be July 9th.
July 9th,
Yeah,
yes, not
yeah.
June 9th, July
Yeah.
9th. So just reiterating what I'm saying, this area south of the brook is prevented from flooding until the water gets quite high by this retaining wall. So it comes up and it comes up and it comes up and it goes over the backyards of the houses here. And ultimately it will go across Hudson Avenue and start to impact Robert and Christiana Walker and Owen and Jane. It will cross Mill Street and Hudson Avenue the way it did before. And then finally, when it's deep enough, if we've had 5 inches of rain, it'll go over the retaining wall and start going into that area at the south side. And so what I asked them to do initially, back in December, when I first wrote my letter of concern, I think it was December 30th, is I asked them, what would be the benefit of removing that retaining wall, taking it out completely, and lowering the south bank, which is a bought out property that's going to be demolished no matter what, and lower the backyard there by a few feet so the river could spread southward and away from those houses that are endangered. It wouldn't protect them from very high floods. They would still get flooded as before. But minor rainfall shouldn't cause flood evacuations. And so that would mean that minor rainfalls would be absorbed in that broader floodplain that would be created by this intervention. Secretary Moore had said very clearly in her sort of, we can't do anything about this letter, that a river engineer had to be providing them with a scenario for relief. In other words, saying, yes, do something. And we believe that doing something will make the brook safer. They needed a river engineer to say that. So Stacy Pomeroy and Evelyn Boardman are both working for ANR, and they have presented us with models of what the brook looks like now. In other words, it's got very different boundaries, the yellow and the orange on this picture. It's got very different boundaries of where it could go when it gets high water. And they are mapping that and doing models, both 1D, which is looking down like this, and 2D, which is depth. And they are going to be presenting those to us on July 9th. The other, I don't know why they considered this, because no one asked them if this would be a solution, but there is a railroad abutment that follows the railway line as it used to cross over the brook. And that railroad abutment is very high embankment. It's about 45 feet high in here. And similarly off Hudson, it's about 30 feet high on the north side. And that abutment, they're saying, you know, you make the brook a lot safer if we remove that abutment. Now, it's not entirely preposterous, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands of cubic feet of soil and granite rocks and things like that. And I thought a much simpler and less costly removal would be to take down the brook, the backyard of 107 Mill Street to a level where the brook could spread sideways into it comfortably. So we're going to see what we find out. We're going to see whether or not they would take this second approach as opposed to taking out the bridge abutment, which I don't think anybody's proposed putting up the money for. Finding the money to do the removal of soil and the removal of those blocks is going to be a whole heck of a lot simpler. Now, meanwhile, according to the budget that Josh put together, watershed hydrology and modeling in the Great Brook scoping study would, the early stage of that would be about $34,000. And the hydraulic modeling of the entire brook, including all the bridges and the impact of reconstructing Brook Road, the impact upon the brook of doing that would be another $40,000. What I asked this team, that is Stacy Pomeroy and Evelyn Boardman, who are both very competent people in their fields, to do, because they said, what more can we do? What would be the next best thing? I and Pat Moulton and a few other people at that meeting, George Springston being another, asked them, would they model the rest of the brook up to the top? And not tell us what to do with the brook or what to do with the Brook Road, but really just show us what is the real topography of the brook now that has torn itself to bits and created a new version of itself. And so they are doing that, and they will be presenting that information to us also on July 9th.
What time is this meeting on the 9th?
Oh,
And
geez.
where is it?
It's at National Light.
National Life.
At ANR's offices, and I believe it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, on the 9th.
You sent a note out.
Is it open to the public?
It certainly would be open to you.
No, I guess I'm
It's
working,
not,
but I
it's a
mean,
small room.
there might be people watching who might want to attend.
It's
And so it's not open to anyone?
Zoom.
Oh, it's Zoom.
It is, or actually, it's Microsoft Teams.
Will the credentials of that meeting be shared publicly?
No, it's all .gov people. Actually, everybody at the meeting is .gov. And it's a room that's smaller than the select board room at upstairs in municipal building. So it's tough to imagine.
It's not gonna be very, open to.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
Okay, I mean, that clarity there is all we're looking for.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's good. And what I can say, looking forward, is I hope they come up with a proposal we can afford, because unless these people are given money to leave their homes and have another home, then they're gonna have to be evacuated repeatedly. And I know a couple of them are just scared to death of the next flood. So that's my report.
thank you.
Thank you. May we address with you like the question of the larger emergency management report?
Yeah,
I mean, just to share the model that the grants group used.
Mhm.
The grants group hosted an event. It was like, we want to share with the town the full breadth of what we're doing right now. And there were enough select board members in attendance that it was a warned meeting.
Got it.
If the scope of what you want to share
Mhm.
is, would otherwise subsume a select board meeting,
Mhm.
we would invite you to select a date, a
Mhm.
time that is reasonable for you to have
Yeah.
all that information together, call it, and then hopefully we will have
Yeah.
enough of us there to feel informed.
Yeah, thank you.
And then I think that's like the scheme by which you get the space you need to
Mhm.
like go into the depth of what you're holding.
Yeah, I have plenty more illustrations. I want the public to understand, and Carl has offered to help me
Yeah.
find a date with me.
Great,
Yeah.
fantastic,
So, yeah,
fantastic. Thank you.
and I look forward to that.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, thank you. Oh, I mentioned.
Okay. I think we've,
Emergency management coordinator.
Yeah, that is what's next.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to say what you want to say first about that? I mean, do you have thoughts about, or should I just introduce it briefly?
I mean, I think you've identified the need,
Okay.
like that is rising and growing.
All right, okay. So, all thanks to Dan and Mo, who, in July of last year worked, I don't know how many hours, guys, for, about 3 weeks solid, and took time off work and everything to work in the Emergency Operations Center, tracking all of the, donated and borrowed equipment that came from elsewhere as it went out to volunteers, tracked all the volunteers themselves, assigned people to go to different places where there were projects identified, and help coordinate with nonprofit organizations and churches, et cetera, that were offering help. So they had this database thing rolling and people could plug into it. I mean, I was just amazed. And I know that we're not done having disasters. I don't want to have another one this year, for sure. But we're not done having disasters. So an emergency management coordinator basically does what Dan and Mo did. They stay in the EOC, which is the downstairs area for the Emergency Operations Center. They track what's going in. They call for additional supplies when we run out of stuff. If the fire department says we're gonna have to be 8 hours dealing with this brush fire, or 8 hours, they also would be the person or persons who would write and get donuts and snack food or whatever to keep everybody going. It's every kind of resupply you can imagine. I did it in 2023, and it was almost impossible to be out in the field, going into people's basements at the same time to be at the EOC doing this kind of thing. So it's really helpful if someone is committed and is willing to work pretty close to me and pretty close to at least half time for a few weeks. It really narrows the number of people and the type of person.
Specifically in the event of a disaster.
In
Not-
the event of a disaster.
Not
Not
half
general.
time, all the time, half
Correct.
time in the event of a disaster.
But it'd be so lovely if somebody was pre-committed to do that.
Yeah,
In other words, if we found that person before a disaster instead of trying to find them on the fly. So that's my introduction.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Yeah, this is an announcement, friends, that this position is identified already, pre-identified, that the need is here. And it's an invitation to consider, could you be the person to fill that post in the time of need?
And folks should contact you if they're
They
interested,
contact
right?
me, and the internet address is on the website.
Fantastic, thank you,
Thank you.
Michael.
Great. Okay. Route 2 intersection.
Well,
both-
the, the assistant grant administrator.
Oh,
This
well, we
was,
kind of did that. didn't we?
yeah, I guess just to acknowledge that it is on the agenda,
And Karen already talked about it.
spoke to it. Yes, I mean, to encapsulate again, for those joining late.
Yeah.
The existing grants group has had to narrow its focus. To be largely about, flood impact, flood, aftermath. As well as, potential, village expansion. Meanwhile, there are many, many other grant opportunities that the town has, before it, that right now there's no one covering. So looking for someone in a similar vein to step into that role, to carry those threads, weave them when necessary. And yeah, I mean, there's growth opportunity here. There are grants being sought to provide a salary even, or a stipend, I don't know what it's being called, but monies to step into this role. That's not guaranteed, but that's like in the works. And so again, are you possibly able to fill this need for the town? Thank you for considering.
Yep.
And there is stipend wise, there is $8,000 in the town budget for stipends, for grants.
I guess I'm unclear how much of that is going to the existing grants
Well, I think
administration.
we would talk to
Yeah.
Karen
So-
about that, and
I can clarify what Karen has said, which is that the main grants administrator had a stipend of 4,000 a year from last year's budget. Been raised to 8,000 a year for next year's budget, and Karen spoke to that.
Yeah.
And then there is no stipend for the assistant grants
Got
administrator,
it.
but she suggested that some of the stipend that is being held for the grants administration in general could be shifted to that
Yeah,
position.
that was generous of her.
But the minimum, there would be a stipend.
Yes, I mean, it's primarily volunteer, but there are costs that driving and time and so forth, so. But there are apparently a lot of grants still that could be approached, elevator, art sculpture on the new park, you know, lots of things.
It's literally every realm except flood support and
Yeah.
village expansion.
I mean, Karen is on the big grant we're going for.
Exactly.
And that's what her focus really has to be. Okay. Anyone interested in that should go to Karen, I guess, talk to Karen.
True.
And find out what she sees in that role. So Route 2 intersection, Peter and Patty both are on top of that, but they're not here.
I mean,
So
so
what do we?
Peter has sent a long, solid analysis that I wonder if we summarize for the people.
If we can summarize it, that'd be good. I know it's pretty long.
So yeah, so Peter and Patty have been deep in this.
Yeah,
They're met with V-Trans. V-Trans placed the blame on Federal Highway with concerns about utility historic reviews. Peter suggests we ask our town attorney to file a public records request with V-Trans. So that's like potential for motion there. Asking
real
for-
quick before you get to
Yeah,
all that.
please, yeah.
So between when they met with V-Trans and Peter's suggestions, we received a letter on June 13th from Patty Coburn from V-Trans to all the select board members.
yes,
The letter,
I mean, I think that's what Peter said was underwhelmed.
well, I know, I just think before you get to like doing a FOIA request and stuff, we should explain why he's responding to it.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So the letter is about the Route 2 intersection. And it basically, gives us the same map that we saw in the presentation in May, of a much more scaled down version of the Route 2 intersection. And the scope being pretty minimal, not a lot of change to most of the things. There is a crosswalk envisioned, a sidewalk extension across the street to a crosswalk. But that this would be part of the Route 2 paving project currently scheduled for 2029. The underwhelming for Peter Youngbear was basically, we felt like we'd already said, like, that's not enough information. How do we dig in? How do we have conversations about other things that can happen? And despite that conversation, we get a letter that basically just reiterates a very minimal project 4 years from now that doesn't actually take away a lot of the danger involved in the curve.
yeah, there's no light for one thing.
Well, yeah, I don't know that in the original, even in the big scope, there was ever a light. But it isn't changing the grade, it isn't really, it's removing the bars, the handrails.
Yes,
But it's not really changing that island size. It's really not doing a lot, it's more, it seems almost more cosmetic with then, us getting just on the other side of this property, getting a crosswalk, which would obviously help with pedestrian, because the sidewalk, from the bridge, would be extended.
yeah,
But it's pretty minimal.
So there is the opportunity for us to ask the town attorney to file a public records request. to see any new specifics that might emerge from that process. Um, excuse me while I pick out what to summarize here.
Graham, you have a thought?
I think that one of the things that Peter spoke of that is critical in this process is getting key players in state government. We have the Marshfield Senator Purcell is very influential on transportation. Ann Cummings is a key player. And the rest of the delegation and Representative Mahaley. I think that what's apparent is for, it seems, internal budget reasons. V-Trans has backtracked on a commitment that they made. And
that we've signed a contract for it.
and we signed a contract for it, and it was very demonstrative. I mean, I think I sent you the numbers on how much is being spent on other towns along Route 2. And I think that the key thing, I think, would be for the select board to really have a meeting, the state players. And I'm not talking about, I think if Secretary Flynn wants to be involved with it too, but I think that the key thing is for the select board to get the state reps to just simply present the case. I mean, that we fought for this for
Well, you
decades.
you sent out a article in the Times Argus in '69.
And David Strong and I
Yeah.
pushed this so that they finally said, you know what? You guys are investing in the bridge, you guys are investing in this. We really need to throw some money at this and solve the problem. And that just completely evaporated for whatever reason. And I think that we need a real commitment to address the apparent safety issues. It is not for them to simply say, statistically speaking,
Yeah.
no one has died.
Yeah.
It's really not. We have paid a price as a town for that intersection. People are scared. This is the gateway to our community, and
Yeah.
people are scared. And that has told, and as I said, as the former road commissioner, many people just simply avoid the intersection completely. So I think that if the select board can really focus on getting the state players focus on this problem.
So, yeah, Peter says engaging Senators Pertlick, Cummings, Watson, Representative Mahaley on the following 3 items specifically or especially. One is ASAP, not 2029, immediately repaint the crosswalk by the post office, which is faded. An additional crosswalk at the library would be terrific.
Yeah.
Yellow warning signs at all these crossings. Could even include electronic flashing lights activated by the pedestrian, which are becoming the norm statewide.
And they're solar powered, so they're simple, really.
Yeah, so demanding that now, not 4 years from now. They're asking Plainfield to give up this major improvement that was years in the making. The trade-off isn't even close to fair if we must wait 4 years for any safety improvements. Like, those are all things that don't need to tear up the road. That we should demand that they consider a traffic signal alternative for the intersection. We know that the temporary signals worked well during the Main Street Bridge reconstruction. They could review that. Moving on, comments, if V-Trans is not willing to do these minimal things, we could stage actions to, increase, to build pressure, to put pressure on those holding power here. Finally, the fact that it's the Federal Highway Administration that controls both US Route 2 and the Brook Road, which is the federally designated connector to 302. That means this intersection is in fact the actual connection and should be up to federal standards, which means a T-signaled intersection, which is what was designed in the big project version.
Mhm.
So then, leveraging the fact that this is a federal moment for traffic is a point of leverage for us. So that was Peter's, the summary of Peter Youngbear's analysis following he and Patty's meeting with Patty Coburn of V-Trans. And I'm seeing Betsy Ziegler with a hand raised.
Yes, Betsy.
Yeah, hi. I just was gonna say, that I think the best action, one action we could take is to meet with our governor. You know, he cares about Plainfield, supposedly, and he knows we need help. And that's one thing he could do, is help us get this intersection really changed the way it should be. And I also wanted to just say that in the design that was, that the town approved, it did include a light. So we were coming,
That
you know,
clarification.
we would be.
Yeah,
coming to a
I
T.
thought it had.
Yeah, we come to a T and, you know, you wait for the light or whatever, but it would just eliminate so much stress that exists at that intersection. And it really impedes our development as a town.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thanks.
Can I add to that?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I also wanted to suggest Doug Farnham, perhaps as a pathway to the governor, but Doug had on several occasions said to me directly that he would be looking forward to finding ways to help us. And I believe was part of the leverage in getting this A&R study done at Great Brook. And I think if, you know, in terms of meeting with the governor, you could probably start with Doug and ask if that could be set up.
May
I
I
can
ask,
connect.
what position is Doug Farnham? I don't know Doug
He's the
Farnham.
state recovery officer. Pat Moulton works for him.
Yeah,
The state's broken up.
right next to the governor.
Yeah,
And I know Doug, I consult
He grew up in this area.
him. He grew up in town.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. He stopped in the day after the flood in July. He stopped in here in person with his wife and said, what can we do for you?
Yeah, I'll check in with Doug and see what he suggests.
Just as a point of information, the property owner across from the Plainfield Inn, that building.
20 School Street.
Is it
Yes.
20? That attorney has written a series of letters and wants to be an active voice in the project. I don't know what that means exactly. But I also think if anyone has a connection to Mike Davidson, as he is interested in the Plainfield Inn and hasn't purchased it yet, but that negotiation is ongoing, I think he would be another person who could possibly be a helpful advocate in this process, if anybody knows.
Yeah, those are good connections. I think I think we do need to get together with this group of powered people. And we should invite Mike and the owner of I forget his name, but
Ruben.
yeah.
Attorney is Sarah Fields.
Sarah Fields. Yeah, you sent it out. Yeah, I have it. That's a good suggestion. They're abutters, so they kind of need to be involved. Well, let me check with Doug. I'll do that and see what he suggests we do.
And then the other thing, and it may be best since Patty and Peter were the ones that met with V-Trans before, I do think maybe by July 14th, if we could ask them to create a letter of response. Even if we're gonna do this legislative meeting and do all these other things, I think a formal letter of, you know, this isn't good enough. We need short-term projects. We need a much better long-term
Right.
plan.
Very specific, yeah.
Would be good, and I think Peter and Patty are probably the people to write that, probably with assistance from Josh and Bram and others, but it would be great if, you know, we could, when they get back from being away, if we could ask them to engage on that. I think Peter would happily do that.
I think so too. Yeah.
Agreed. All right.
Okay, good. I guess that's it on that subject. 20 School Street, we were just talking about that.
Wow, this is why I know their names. I'm literally
Yeah.
looking at I'm looking at their zoning violations.
Is Karen on?
So Karen has sent a message. Karen is not able to be here today. I can offer an
can you-
update from Karen.
Yeah,
Um,
It's-
the Karen had asked the lawyer to start the permit process if the owner or the owner's representative of 20 School Street fills out a zoning permit application. There is no further action by the town for the violation. I'll be unavailable for the meeting. I'll be out of town. So this is in process, basically. We're waiting to see if they fill out a zoning permit application, and if they do not fill out that application, Karen is going to know about it and tell us.
Yeah, it sounded like it was,
There was a communication from the attorney, Mr. Rubin, I guess is the owner, to Karen that they're supposed to meet on this exact issue. And
Fantastic.
yeah, it sounded like it was.
I
in
think this was
process.
like select board due diligence. Was
Yeah.
there responsibilities that we were carrying here to attend to, but it sounds like there is not.
Well, I will just say, so. Hopefully they deal with it, but so this is the old hardware store, and when it was turned from the old hardware store from commercial space into multi-family dwelling back at least 2022 or sooner, they never got any permits. And then when they added a fourth apartment, they never gotten any permits, and so they are, several years out of compliance and have had multiple warnings based on this paperwork.
Yeah.
And I have a point of information for you about 20 School Street, which is in conjunction with the Batchelder removal project, which is 20 School Street is identified as a property that will receive substantial financial assistance through the grant that we're writing, that you pointed out we're likely to get, in that the shoring up of their foundation and reinforcing of the structure will be done at no cost to them. So they are going to receive substantial assistance through the town.
And an additional fund of information as to Dan's point that this has gone on for years without addressing the rules of the town. I have once again circled with an expert in ticket writing to try to coordinate with, we might start with zoning to get our books, our laws and ordinances in order, and then begin that process, because if we had that process in place, we would have, a really good legal case to go forward. As it is now, I don't know, so.
Yeah, it's probably
Water
would be difficult. Yeah. But,
Well, but I
I'm
do
glad it's
wonder,
being addressed.
I do wonder if through the town if they haven't resolved it, if they're expecting a bunch of money to help keep their building from falling into the river, if they're not in compliance, I wonder, is that a leverage point where they can,
Yeah,
if we're gonna give you all this money to basically improve your property, you should at least follow town rules.
yeah.
It seems like a minimum requirement.
Let's see what they do. They're supposedly working on permits. Karen's on it, that sounds like. Get it in compliance and then make sure that they follow the rules from now on. Do the tickets that we're talking about come with fines?
Yeah, well, that.
We
that
can-
has
we
to
can
be
do that.
expressed. Yeah, that has to be expressed in the ordinance, but it would be, I think it's up to $800 and it's per offense, so.
Yeah.
That could add up.
Could
And I
add
think
up.
There would be a unequivocal demonstration by the town, you're in violation, here's why, we sent you a notice and all that.
Yeah.
And it's a much more complicated process than I originally thought, but we have to try.
That's probably why it doesn't exist right now. But yeah, it made me think while you were talking about the animal feeder problem. Do we have any reason to think about an ordinance or, I hate to keep adding things, but.
I think, that situation is so strange because it falls, I've heard all the lines, but well, it's not our problem, this and that, but.
Yeah,
The scary thing is that I think that individual is getting more aggressive in his antics, and there was an incident where there was almost a physical fight between him and a resident, so I don't know in terms of what the town has purview over, because it falls, maybe, I don't know, I'll ask.
it's a tough one, but it just occurred to me while you were
Something to think about.
describing.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you could also look at it as a general ordinance about disposing of food, compost or rubbish on on town property that isn't put into a container. I mean, it could just be as simple as.
We have a solid waste thing that talks a lot about people dumping it on private property, so maybe we can expand that.
Yeah, yeah, good thought.
Public policy.
My son has a game camera that's solar powered. I know it's battery powered, but it's amazing. Night, daytime, I mean, so if we're interested in finding out where he's doing it, it sounds like it's in the same place most of the time.
It's in 3 or 4 different places.
Yeah,
at different
okay.
times. There's also, not just food. They have a session with bicycles for children, and
Yeah.
that's where you see all those bicycles around. What a
Sounds like a big,
mental.
yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey Carl, can I make a motion to accept the minutes from the June 9th select
Please
board
do.
meeting?
yes,
Second.
all those in favor? say
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Carl, can I also make a motion to approve the accounts payable for June 18th and payroll for June 12th and June 18th?
yeah,
You second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye. May I announce the date for the next select board meeting?
please do.
July 14th.
At
At,
5 PM. Because we have the zoning hearing from 5 PM to 6 PM. And then the regular select board meeting at 6 PM.
it's a
Thank
good thing we have somebody with a memory.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, 5 PM.
May I make a motion to adjourn the meeting at
Yes.
7:54 PM?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Greg.
friends. Good night.
Yeah.